Hello everyone and welcome to Cappuccino with HR. My name is Rudi Bauer, and after 40 years in business, I'm 100% sure that the success of companies is directly related to the passion of the people working for these companies. With the Cappuccino of HR, we created a format where we really invite people, it's HR leaders, it's recruiters, it's talent acquisition guys, and we're talking about all the different kind of topics, and the range is going from AI, of course, to new work, to leadership, and all the challenges along the way. Yeah, hello and welcome to another episode of Cappuccino with HR. And today I'm really delighted to have Nora with us. Nora Dietrich, she's founder and CEO of Between People, and I met her at a conference in Berlin the first time a couple of months ago already. And it was a really wonderful panel discussion, and I was listening to it, and they were talking about a topic which I think is unfortunately, the most underrepresented one in business environment. It's mental health. Nora, welcome, and thank you for taking your time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and I'm glad that we ran into each other that day.
And before we start, I would ask you to briefly introduce yourself in a few sentences.
Of course. I'm Nora Dietrich. Originally, I am a psychotherapist for CBT, and I have been working with adults and children. But for the past, I think now 6 years, I have been roaming around organizations talking about topics like mental health at work, relationship building, and all those apparent soft skills that UHR folks are usually familiar with. And just a couple of weeks ago, I released my first book, which is also called Mental Health at Work. And it's literally a summary of my past 6 years with tools and ideas, but also a lot of real life stories on how mental health at work shows up and what we can actually do to change it. Because that's the core of my work, is one question, which is, what do we need to do our best work and still stay healthy? Which seems to be a contradiction in the modern world, but I try to resolve that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And as it's called Cappuccino with HR, I'm asking this question to all my guests. What's your favorite coffee?
It is actually cappuccino with oat milk. Warm in winter and cold in summer. But I think that's my favorite. And I love beans from Italy that are strong and give me the energy for the day.
Yeah. Let's jump into the topic. And I mean, mental health, I think, as I said, I think it's still underrepresented. It's not really taken serious from top management in some organization. It's always treated a little bit, okay, don't fool around. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Focus on the important stuff, and the important stuff normally is shareholder value, and then it's profit. And I mean, in times like crisis, probably it's double weird. And as you were talking about your book, I have got your book, so I was really looking into it, and it's extremely amazing. It's really easy to read. I think it's a really cool summary. And I found in chapter 2, I found some kind of figures, which I have them in front of me on the screen now, so we can probably go through them. And I think on the left side of the book, on the left page, you were talking about how big is the amount of people really affected by this kind of topics. And on the right hand side, you have really done the business value and the business results and business what it means for business. And probably you just can, as you probably have them much better in head than me, you can probably name some of these figures, because I was really shocked and impressed. So it's surprising figures that really have a big impact on the business value. So probably we can talk about that first.
Yeah. Of course. So I think the general overarching theme is, when you look at the costs, is that we talk about 1 billion people and $1 trillion every year. This is the amount of people that are actually facing mental health struggles, such as psychiatric diseases, like what you understand as mental illnesses. But that's not only it, because of course all of us, we are moving on the spectrum. We might not have a mental illness yet, but we might also not be fully in the flourishing state where we have all the powers and the best form of our mental health either. So where we're stressed, we feel drained, we feel stretched. And this is something that we experience as a society right now. And when you think about it from a business perspective, that means that just the sick leaves based on mental illnesses increased by 52% over the past 10 years. So we lose millions and millions of working days every year due to exhaustion, due to fears, due to whatever is going on in our private lives. And of course, that is very, very costly. And what also employees share is that in 71% of all cases, they felt a negative impact on their personal lives. So conflict with their partner because they're working too hard, or they're moaning too much, or because they're not present with their family life. But also we know from an organizational perspective that actually investing in mental health reduces fluctuation by 60%. So it literally is a retention builder. It's a talent magnet. More than 60% of all employees would shift their current employer for a job that just offers more mental health support. And when we look at leaders, that number even increases to 75% of all people who would just change their jobs immediately. So I think when we think about mental health, it's not just this nice to have decoration, or we do something nice for the well-being of our people. It's a physical business case that can be very costly, or it can have a huge return on investment. Because if companies actually do something actively, which only currently 26% of all organizations do, which I find shocking because we all have mental health and we all bring it to work every day. But if you do invest, you get a return on investment from at least $1 to $4.7 invested. And that's just the smallest number, actually, depending on when you start doing something. It decreases presenteeism, absenteeism, and it's so much better for your financial gain and your recruitment strategy. So I think in total, it's not just like a human case, a case of human decency to say we take health seriously, but it is a very strong business case underneath.
But wouldn't that mean, normally companies are looking for growth rates. They're looking for business potentials. So, probably the biggest business potential in normal market conditions and in normal businesses is probably having a focus on that. So, should companies, if I see these figures, if I want to grow 20% per year or 25% per year, it's the easiest is putting this energy into my team and putting the energy into all the mental health stuff, right?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I think right now it's just, there's several hurdles that we have to overcome. I think, first of all, a lot of organizational leaders do not know this. They think investing in a stress management workshop is a cost. It helps people maybe a little bit, but it doesn't really affect my business, my profit. They don't understand that the culture piece underneath is much bigger than just the external solution they might be paying for, right? Like a lot of companies offer employee assistance programs or workshops, trainings of some sorts, which is great. But most organizations do not really do the inner work. So the work on the work itself, like how do we set up KPIs? How do we run projects? How do we hire and fire? What do we understand being a good leader actually means in today's world? So we don't really think about the culture pieces that have a huge impact on our motivation and engagement, on our illness level, on our stress level, and if we actually come back even after long-term illness. So I think there's a lack of awareness. And there's obviously a huge stigma still, right? Yeah. So maybe we talk a little bit more about burnout these days. Maybe depression is a word we use more regularly, or saying I go to therapy. But there's a lot of stigma still surrounding most mental illnesses, and especially sharing that at work. So 60% of all employees have never spoken about how they're actually doing at work. So it's just something that we are currently discovering, and it's not on the minds of shareholders necessarily yet.
Yeah, and but to create this awareness, to get it right, to get it on a really useful level, wouldn't that mean that we need openly to talk about these topics as well? Because I think it's a two-way communication issue. You can't blame the companies if the employees are not willing to talk about it, and I think you need a kind of a culture, you need a kind of a basic set up for that, and you need, of course, safe space to have this openness, to bring it to work and to talk. In a lot of companies, I read the mission statement or the vision statement: bring your full yourself to work. Yeah, but honestly, it's not the truth.
No, in today's world, in most organizational cultures, it's actually dangerous to bring the full self to work. Especially minorities can tell you many stories why that is true. But also for mental health, it's true, because there's still a lot of discrimination for people who actually share that they have a diagnosis. Might it just be getting ignored or getting gaslit for it, or even like not being considered in the next career steps, till firing. Like all of this still happens every day. So it's totally fair for employees to say, I'm going to split my private self and my work self, and I'm going to keep things to myself because I don't know how my leader will react or how my company reacts. But this, of course, doesn't only cost us trust when it comes to mental health, but it probably also costs us trust when it comes to talking about tension in the team, talking about like innovation, like creativity also needs a lot of vulnerability and trust. So if we don't have the trust to actually share more about ourselves, we will lose out on several ends, not just the end of health, but also the end of, like running a creative business where people can actually bring all of their ideas to the table too. And yeah, in today's world, we don't have role models, like it's very hard. Also for my book, I was like looking for people in high positions. So senior leaders, top management leaders who would share their story. And it's so hard to find someone who is actively still working there. It's very easy to find people who have had a burnout like 20 years ago and now share their learnings, and like how they live differently today. But if they're still working there, it's really, really hard to find someone who shares vulnerably what's happening for them.
And I think the general trend, if you look on Instagram, if you look on Facebook, normally people are presenting themselves in the full mood, and everyone is fully motivated, and everybody is pumped up with energy. And it's very tough to show yourself in a kind of a weak condition. That's not the normal life. And honestly, that I think we are really afraid to show ourselves in this kind of mood.
Yeah.
And I wrote a LinkedIn post from you that I think it was last week. This was this LinkedIn post where companies are offering some kind of special bonuses if you're not getting sick. What's your take on this? Because for me, this was really shocking.
Yeah, I love the discussion actually. So if you can find it, please read it. But because some people actually really love it. Like some are saying, "Oh, I'm never ill. I have been working for the past 15 years and only had 2 sick days. So it would be great to get a bonus at the end of the year for not having been ill," which seems to be a thing some organizations have, right? So if you have a very minimal amount of sick days till none of them, you get a bonus of like 500 euro, 1,000 euro, 2,000 euro. So it makes a difference in many people's lives. And I was questioning, is that actually sending the right message? Because if you think about a bonus, it's like a financial reward, which is an extrinsic motivational factor, which we already know is a bit critical sometimes. But the problem is, what are we saying? We say that when you're ill, you have less value, right? Which is true because it's costly. Sick day, every sick day costs us as a company. But we also can say that you shouldn't be ill even though you feel ill. So it usually pushes people to work even though they have symptoms. They might then infect other people, or they might go beyond their boundaries, which over time can lead to even more chronic disease or even burnout. And we say that for people who have chronic illnesses, or even for just women that are still on their cycle, whenever you feel bad, you're worth less. And you never have the access to a bonus like this. If you're a parent, you will have sick children. You will need to take sick days because of them. And you will never have the access to that bonus. So we say, instead of saying take care of your health and maybe promote that and give a bonus for, actually doing preventative measures to stay strong, to stay healthy, to stay fit, we just pay them in case they're not ill, which I think is just something we have to discuss, at least from a mindset perspective.
Yeah, I really was shocked by the idea, not by your post, but by the idea, because honestly, I haven't been sick for many years, fortunately, but I think I see that as a really big privilege, and normally you can't pick and choose. It happens when it happens, and you can't be blamed for becoming sick. So of course you can treat your body like shit, then you're probably you run into this danger automatically. But I really see it as a gift and a privilege, and I'm really thankful for not being sick for such a long time now. But it's a gift.
And I think a bonus for health is great, but maybe not connected to the sick leave, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But saying I took
Yeah.
part in the health
Yeah.
corporate program and now I'm ambassador for the
Yeah.
topic, and then
Yeah.
you get rewarded, or you founded an ERG, like an employee resource group, and you're moving those topics forward. Feel free to pay bonuses for that. I love that. You know, it's just the question: what are we actually rewarding here?
I mean, if a company wants to take that serious, and if a company wants to start building this kind of trustful culture and setting it up right, and getting into this kind of positive impact that you showed in your book with all these kind of amazing, surprising numbers and ROEs and what it does for retention. How can companies start building up this culture? What do you think are the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 necessary steps to get this right? Because I mean, you can't. I think it can't be designed on a cardboard. I mean, it's a kind of a living thing which needs to develop, which needs trust, which needs a lot of. What are the useful first 3, 4, 5 steps from your point of view?
So I think it really depends where you're at in the organization. So first of all, this topic needs to belong to someone. Someone needs to own that topic. That might be HR. In my case, it's often HR people that are not trained in it, but that just get the topic on their plate and they're like, okay, let's do something with it. So in my eyes, it should be owned by top management. They should have a genuine interest in actually driving this topic forward. So at least have someone who is the spokesperson for health in the company. Then you need a mental health governance, which can be HR, but they have to partner with other people in the organization to get like an actual diverse perspective of what people need. Because often what I see is a split between people working on the floor, so in production, versus people working in the offices, or even, you know, the IT department versus HR department. They have different needs. So if you design a program, you need to know what is currently happening for them. What are the most stressful situations in the day-to-day? And what are the biggest resources? So you need a group of people who love the topic, who want to drive it forward, and who get the budget to actually come up with cool initiatives. And then the first thing you should always do is look at your data. You know, normally you have a big bunch of data. Might it be employee surveys where you can see how is trust in this company? Do people feel they have time to set boundaries and take care of their families? Do they feel they can be flexible in their work life? Whatever, you know, suits them and their mental health. But also look at your sick rates. You know, have they changed? Are there specific heightened numbers in specific departments, such as, for example, IT or production? So where are the pain points here? And has that changed over the course of the year or the past years? So first you need to understand what's happening for us. And then ask some very uncomfortable questions, such as, where do we create unhealth? You know, like, where do we take health away as a company based on our processes, structures, the way we lead? And do we actually profit from that? Do we profit that people are going overboard all the time, that they don't have boundaries? And is that who we want to be? So I think, you know, the first instant is who and what is going on. So who's taking responsibility and what is going on? And based on that, we can then come up with cool initiatives. We might already have some that we just have to make more visible to people through a cool communication strategy, but also to think about the mental health spectrum. So from prevention to basically regeneration or bringing people back after long-term sickness, there's a whole spectrum in between. Do we have stuff that helps that people don't even get sick in the first place? Do we then have stuff like offerings that come to play when people are just on the verge, you know, when you can see stress is increasing, you know, like energy is decreasing? Do we have methods to already start doing something before they fall ill? And what do we do when they fall ill? And then design specific actions, initiatives, programs to actually support people in each phase. Yeah.
Does that mean, I mean, I initially worked a lot in marketing for many years, and I think I never got a single euro from my shareholders and stakeholders without having a kind of a decent marketing strategy. So there's always a product strategy, there's always a sales strategy. Does it mean that we need to come up with a kind of a mental health strategy? So really a structured strategic process with a kind of describing the problem, describing the costs, describing the value, and really getting it in a kind of a full business plan conceptual design?
You don't have to. It depends where you want to get to. I think it's totally fine if you're fully new to the topic to just start with something small. Start with the stress management workshop, but explain to people why you do this. Like what is your thinking behind it? Or start by doing a mental health awareness week, which many people do in October, for example, around a Global Mental Health Day, which is great to just send a signal of like, we think about this topic. It's important to us. We might not know yet fully how to do this, but we're going to try, right? So I think like showing that this is important to you as a company is great. It's just if you want to look at it as more than just single initiatives, but you want to make it like you want to create it in a way that it makes sense to people and that people understand this is a whole journey and people are here for me to like support, and listen and maybe find the right tools that I need in the right moment. I think a marketing strategy makes total sense because I meet so many organizations that have a bunch of offerings, but literally nobody knows about it. Yeah. It's like an intranet page with like 20 links about depression. When you're depressed, you will never, ever use one of those links, So it still has to be usable. It has to be, like you need the feeling that this is anonymous. I can get it quickly. I know where to get it. I know who to speak to. So to create this type of visibility and clarity really helps people, especially in times of crisis, where we don't have the capacity, to like sort through 20 links anymore. So you don't have to do it that way, but if you take it seriously, I would totally recommend to have a bit of a plan and know what are we doing, why are we doing it, and who is actually responsible.
I mean, if you want to really take that up and make it a kind of a living thing in the organization, which has also the chance to survive for quite some time, which I think it needs to be there for a long-term or mid-term at minimum. You need the buy-in from both sides. You need the buy-in from the top and you need the buy-in from the bottom. So I think, how do you get the buy-in from the employees? Because I think that's probably even more important to get their buy-in on all the initiatives than from the top management. Because the top management, I think it's easy if you just show them the figures on your section 2 in the book and they take it serious or they believe in some of them. It's probably very easy to get a kind of, okay, let's give it a try at minimum. But you need also the buy-in from the bottom and all the employees. What's needed to get that one?
So I think like employees are usually very happy if there's any type of offering. I think it would be important if it's new to your culture and it seems a bit dangerous still, like all of a sudden we're supposed to talk about it, even though the years before it was all about performance, that we then have to show that we mean it and why. So I think that's important. But on the other hand, usually you have many mental health ambassadors already silently doing their work in the teams. Like you have the person who is a yoga teacher on the side and who would love to share that with their teams, or you have the person who is just a natural coach, you know what I mean, who's just the person where people go to when they have struggles. If you identify those people and you bring them together and you say, do you want to like maybe bring that power you have, that strength you have to the company, there would be natural multiplicators of whatever you want to do, right? So usually we have those people. And then the other thing is, I think what each and every one of us can do, and also every leader can do without the organization offering anything, is to just be a bit more caring, to be a bit more vulnerable with each other, to say, you know what, I really find it important to know what is happening for you guys. I need to know like what's happening in your lives, how are you doing right now, on a scale from 1 to 10, like how stressed are you and how am I maybe part of this stress, or we as a company are part of this stress, and what can we do to relieve that by just 5%, right? So like to start the conversation on the bottom means to actually be curious about how people are doing, what is taking away from their best work, and what is, like creating stress, and starting to work on that on a day-to-day basis. So it doesn't need to be the big initiative or the big mental health week. It just is about what happens between people, right? Like, am I curious? Am I listening? And am I taking it seriously in a way that we can make changes? to how we give feedback or how we set up projects, on how we schedule meetings. There's like so much we can do that is very small in the day-to-day work, but that relieves the most tension and shows by our behavior, not by what we say, by our behavior, that we care and that mental health is important to us. So I think that gives people even more trust into whatever is coming after as a big program.
What is the best way of really creating? I think because I think the basis and the fundament for all this is a kind of a safe space. Because if you don't get open messages, if you don't get an open discussion, I think everything what you do is probably just guessed out in the blue. So I think therefore it's really important to get this kind of basic fundament of having a safe space. What could companies do to implement that? Because I think that's probably the most difficult one, because if people are not used to bring their full self to work, I mean, they don't start because you tell them, okay, now we have a yoga course on Friday.
No. I think, again, this is the culture piece, right? And for me, the most important ambassadors for culture are our leaders, because they are sitting with the team every day. They know exactly what's on their plate. They know exactly what is taking away their energy and what's giving them energy. So I think to teach and train leaders on mental health competence, like competence and confidence, like I can do this, I can hold spaces, I can have tough conversations, I can lean into emotions, things that leaders are not trained at, right?
Yeah.
So they're scared and they have their own biases and own judgments and own things they believe they have to be at work, Most leaders think they have to be strong all the time and charismatic and, clear-headed, even though, of course, they also feel stress every day. So I think training them on self-leadership, so how can they take care of their own mental health so they show up in a healthier way to their team, super important. And then teaching them how can you create a culture of care, a culture of health within your own team is essential. Because then the team understands this is important to my leader, this is allowed because he or she is doing it too. And, that builds the container. Because if you work in a large-scale organization, there's not just one culture. You know what I mean? There's like hundreds of cultures, pockets of cultures. Every team has their own culture. Even every, collaboration project has their own culture. So you need to train people the skills on how to create a culture of care. And I think, that's just the first I would do if I could.
And I mean, if normally organizations are still working in a kind of a pyramid, so it's you have a top and then it's a little bit broader and it becomes broader and broader and broader. I mean, if it's done in the kind of the bottom up style, I think a question that raises immediately in my head is who is taking care about mental health of the leaders, and who is responsible for them? Because at the end of the day, the CEO is in the most lousy position because he gets all he gets all the tasks on his table because he has to take care that everybody feels well. But who is taking care about the mental health of the CEO then? Yeah? Isn't it a kind of a cultural change into a kind of a 360 degrees kind of everybody takes his role to support the other ones? Isn't that the kind of what's necessary as well?
I think that would be beautiful, right? Like most leaders, especially top management, they live in a vacuum of feedback and a vacuum of support. Also something I write about in the book, right? Like Brian Chesky, the founder of Airbnb, once said it. He said, like, leading a company is the most loneliest place I've ever been. Because people expect so much from you, especially orientation, clarity, good decisions, care, empathy. They expect so much, but you have nobody backing you up. And that's why like most C-level people then have external coaches, maybe, they get support on the outside because they also feel I cannot show up vulnerably because that will send the message that I don't have my shit together and I'm leading this whole organization. So, can I actually speak about it? But what I tell teams when I work with them is not to only look at the leader all the time, to say, you have to help me, right? You have to understand when I'm not feeling well and you have to pick it out and talk to me and find solutions. It's also the other way around. To say, do I actually see when my leader's not doing well? And am I daring to ask him what's going on or her? Am I like also giving that back and say, from human to human, despite the position, I see something is happening for you. And I want you to know that I care enough to actually ask you, is there anything I can support you with? You know what I mean? Like, I think
Yeah.
that's a human decency factor of health.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
It's like, do I react to your stress as much as I hope you react to mine?
And I mean, I think we never had as many generations in the labor market as we have now. So I mean, in some companies we have got 4 generations working together.
Even
And I
five.
think the stress factors and the depression factors for all these generations are not the same. I mean, I think people in my age are probably depressed or stressed by totally different kind of factors than Generation Z, for example. Yeah. So I think you also need to understand the lives of the people. I mean, it's not the work they're doing and the stressing factor within work. So you also need to deep dive into their private lives and the private situations, because I think stress is not only coming from work environment, stress is coming from a kind of a combination of everything.
Yeah, and I don't think like everybody needs to share all their private lives, right? It's just about saying, hey, I'm currently going through a tough relationship spot. I might show up a bit more stressed, a bit shorter in my emails. Maybe I sometimes make shitty decisions. Just know it doesn't have anything to do with you. I'm just, my mind is just somewhere else. And that's enough, right? I don't need to share what's exactly happening in my relationship, but like to understand we have different life areas, or when you become a parent, life is just, a mess. So of course there's other stresses. Or when you're just about, my mom is going into pension soon, retiring. That's relief and stress at the same time, so people are at different stages in their lives, but to not judge it and to say, oh yeah, generation snowflake, like they're all so young and so sensitive, doesn't help anyone understand what is happening in their world. Where does the powerlessness come from? And can we support them? I think this is, again, to me, curiosity lies on the other end of the spectrum of judgment.
Yeah.
And usually we go through the world judging. It's very quick and very easy. But staying open and to say, okay, what is happening for you today in your life, so I can understand why this task is so hard for you, changes the whole trajectory of that conversation and that project too.
Yeah, that's true. I'm looking at the small clock that Ivana mentioned at the very beginning. So we are really running out of time. So we're coming to the end of the session. But I want to raise 1 or 2 questions, final ones to you. I mean, if you were to ask top leaders 1 question, what would this be?
How is your mental health on a scale from 1 to 10? And what would you say about your team?
That's a good one. That's a really good one. And 1 tip for employees to avoid stress and mental imbalance, what would this be?
What they can do? I think the first thing is to understand what is currently on my plate. And is that realistic? Because most of us, we completely overburden ourselves. We say yes to everything. That's why I have a whole chapter on boundaries, which are not easy to set. But to understand what is on my plate, and does it maybe make total sense that I feel emotionally how I feel? I think self-compassion is always a good start.
Nora, it was a pleasure to have you. Thank you for the time. I mean, I think we could continue for another 2 hours, because
for sure.
It's a discussion, an amazing topic. I really recommend this book. I was really diving into it during the weekend, and it's really amazing inputs. And I think it's one of these books where you get a kind of a lot of useful tips and information that you really can directly take into your private or business life, and then really try to play around with it, and it creates, I think it creates a lot of curiosity to deep dive into this topic as well. So thanks for writing this book, thanks for being my guest, and if somebody wants to get in contact with you and reach out to you, what's the best way of reaching out to you?
So, of course, to our website, between-people.com, or LinkedIn, where I share weekly things about mental health and other team and leadership topics. Yes, I'm happy to see you there.
Nora, thank you very much. And it was really great discussion. I really loved this episode. And the audience, please stay tuned for the following ones, and see you, and stay well and not stressed, hopefully.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you for watching Cappuccino with HR. If you enjoy this kind of conversations, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Then you get all this kind of upfront information, your upcoming episodes, and all my nice guests. Cappuccino with HR is brought to you by WeAreDevelopers, Europe's #1 developer community and a leading platform for connecting HR and companies together with developers. If you want to learn more, visit us on WeAreDevelopers.com. Thank you again for watching and see you next time on Cappuccino with HR.